it almost seems as though the problem that at least I struggle with our parents' generation, those baby boomers, is that they wanted to move out of the Black community, and first as they couldn't. So, well, let me start this way. They wanted to leave those civil rights struggles behind. So as soon as they could integrate, they did, and forgot everything else that happened in their childhood. You know, they didn't want to think of what the South was like. They didn't want to think on, you know, how bad things were with sundown towns in the North. They just wanted to forget that. And they did right after Martin Luther King died. Then they were able to move out of the Black community in the late 80s, early 90s. And then they wanted to kind of, we're going to distance ourselves from even that, except I think all of us, on the three of us who were in that situation, we took our Blackness with us even out of the neighborhood. I don't know if others did the same thing. And now I wonder if T-Real, and I've noticed it a little bit with my kids, do they even have a little bit more of a fascination with how it was then, because they didn't get a chance to internalize the bad parts that we grew up with. I'm talking the gunshots, I'm talking the theft, I'm talking a lot of the issues that we had. We were like, I got to get my family out of here and go somewhere else. They kind of look at it like, you know, I missed that. And I think that's that part that we all lose when we had to move. Well, not have to move, but you know what I mean.
Let me toss something in here real quick, because it's another fascinating comparative analysis when I've been living here for X amount of years. For years, you know, Black Brazilians have grown up thinking like, it's cool, we got a mixed society here. It's cool to be mixed, you know, we don't have the racial problems that they have in the United States, when actually they do. But what's intriguing about what's going on now is that Black Brazilians are starting to note that this idea of mixing the people, they've lost out on their whole identity, right? So because Brazil is still a place that consumes all of this culture from the United States, they look at, you know, Everybody Hates Chris. They look at My Wife and Kids. They look at like bootleg Black movies that come out of the States. And now they're looking like, damn, we never had a chance to have that, because they see this, even though with all of the problems that African Americans have, they see this sense of identity and culture and us liking to be with ourselves, whereas they've been taught from day one, you should want to be in mixed environments. You should want to mix your kids. And it's like they're looking to us now like, damn, we should be, how come we couldn't be more like them? And then on the flip side, if you look at what's going on socially, they're actually trying to make African Americans more into what Brazil is. That's why we have this rise in the promotion of this idea of the, you know, like what he said about Florida being the mixing pot. I'm like, okay, but here's a good question, coming from the Florida perspective. It's almost like when I go to Florida, I'm like, this is not even part of the United States, because you don't even got to speak English here. You can speak Portuguese, you can speak Spanish in Florida. You don't even really need to speak English. But my question about a place like Florida, do you see this as a melting pot, or is it a salad bowl?
Salad bowl.
See, this is what I'm saying.
Even even when you're looking at I'm sure even if you could pull it up, Furious, if you want to go ahead and look up just the demographics of Florida, you'll just see, and it's like, it's not really a melting pot in favor for me. Yeah, I'm still going to be at a severe disadvantage. You know, I guess it just really, I guess even looking at as playing the advocate, right? And I don't know, because I know my parents, right? The grandparents, obviously that's more of the y'all's generation. Was it trying to get out of the Black communities, or was it just trying to escape the negative and the more of the poverty, or the you know, I need to get out of here because of the crime, because of the gunshots, because of the senseless murders or drugs and all that's just in the streets. I don't want my child to be caught up in that. I'm going to move them over here. I don't care if it's 100% Black or 100% white. I'm just doing it because of the bottom line. not looking at the color. And that's a question. Curious to understand your thoughts on that.
Kurt, what do you think? We'll start with you.
Okay, well, I had two stories. So, what was that? That had to be the 90s. We all remember Berkeley. And you guys remember my aunt moved to Berkeley in the 90s and was like, my cousins were the only Black people. And then I had another set of cousins move to Troy, probably in the 70s. And they all had negative experiences. So my youngest cousin, so my aunt had 3 children, my oldest cousin, a girl, and her 2 younger sons. She moved out there because of the school system, and my youngest cousin, she ended up sending him to school in Detroit.
Wow.
To DePorres.
Wow.
For high school.
Why?
That's what I'm asking.
Because it was so racist.
Wow.
So my oldest cousin was mad because she was going to Cass, and then my aunt moved to Berkeley. And she's like, I don't want to, like, I'm already in Cass and you're going to move me to this school with no Black people. So she was mad about it. In fact, that was part of the reason my aunt and uncle got divorced. Because he was like, I don't want to be out there with them people and it is not going to work out like you think it's going to work out, and something bad is going to happen. So I think it was in 2nd or 3rd grade, my aunt that didn't believe in whoopings, they tried to take my 2 cousins social services.
Why?
And she's the only one in the family that didn't believe in whoopings. Like my mama beating tail.
Wow.
Yes.
So they tried to take them because they didn't like it was a reason why the teacher said something, social services came to the house and everything, and my uncle was just like on 500 and was like, I told you not, you never listen to me. Like that was like the end. So like right after they resolved all that, they got like divorced. Yikes. Mark, what? And
then one other thing I was gonna say about Florida. So when we went to Florida, there was I think it was a FAMU reunion. And so everyone that looked like my family was not African American. The only African Americans looked like it was no miscegenation in Florida, and those were the only African Americans there. But anybody, my wife's complexion to my kids' complexion, was not an African American. They were like Haitian, Caribbean, Hispanic, something different. And so they would like come up and talk to us and like, what? And they're like, oh, we thought you were one of us. Mark, so that was my experience in Florida.
Mark, why did you move out? And I know you said you left the country, but we're even thinking about, your mom. I mean, why do you think they moved out?
Well, my father had passed away in the mid 90s, and we stuck around in Detroit for a number of years, but by that time I had really started, traveling to Brazil back and forth every year. And, for my mother, my mother and I, we talk about this a lot, when I talk to her, and she's just like, she don't want nothing to do with Detroit. She's like, I don't go down there. There's nothing down there for me. Every time she thinks of Detroit, it's something of, I ain't trying to get jacked. Niggas down there is crazy. I mean, okay, she ain't gonna say, the N word, but I'm just saying she has no desire to go back there. I mean, she is one of the few Black people in the area where she lives in, and she's happy because my mother's not a people person. She'll stay in her own little corner and she'll be happy with that. But if the connecting point that I can make here, and this is why we have to get into these sitcoms one of these days, what we're talking about right now, George Jefferson said this on one of the shows where he says, what was it? They were trying to organize a protest in their apartment building where they lived on the east side, right? And the Willises had invited them to do this protest, right? And George's attitude was like, because they came out of poverty, they explained that whole story. But George's attitude was like, look, we march and we do all of this protesting when we suffer, and we already did our suffering. So we talking about 74, 75. He's directly talking about coming out of the civil rights era. When the Jeffersons debuted on All in the Family, they actually had an episode where they showed where Martin Luther King had got assassinated, right? So I see that in a lot of Black people. Like, you're taking your Blackness with you, but you got to get away from that aspect of Blackness because you feel like, well, I can do better than this. I don't have to be there anymore. I'm still Black, but I'm going to do my Black over in this corner over here.
Man, good point. And T-Real, I'll just say on my end, my final straw, actually, just a quick story, was when I remember my wife pulled in with our two oldest, and she pulled in the driveway. It was like 3 or 4. No, I'll take that back. Might about 6 or 7 because it was after work, but it was still broad daylight. It was not in the winter. It was broad daylight. She pulls into the driveway, and then I pulled into the driveway right behind her, and all of a sudden we heard a woman down the street just going off about 2 houses down. So neither one of us had gotten out of the car at the time, but you can kind of tell somebody's screaming. You hear something going on. Look down, and you would think I was watching, Menace to Society. There's this woman with a gun pointed like this, and she's yelling at the other guy on the block. I guess, obviously, it was a woman scorned. And so she was mad, yelling at him. He didn't open the door. And so she just started busting and firing at his house. And so my wife is trying to get down. The 2 kids, they were younger, they in car seats, they can't get down. I couldn't get out the car and go to her. And at that point, now mind you, I had grown up in that neighborhood my entire life. I shared with Marcus recently, and actually, Kurt, you relate to this. Kurt, I remember years ago, I told you, man, we live in the ghetto. You was like, man, we don't live in the ghetto. And, and I was like, yeah, we do. And I realized, I told Mark, I said, it's almost like my experience living across the street from the rec center that I lived at. It was totally different than you guys. Y'all had a calm neighborhood. I always had something popping off on the weekends. When that place closed at 2 a.m, I seen some of the greatest melees. I wish I had a cell phone back then to record that stuff, because I would have had a booming YouTube channel. A lot more subscribers than I'm sure I have now. And between that, the people getting shot behind the center, between, people stripping cars, it was like that was me. That was my neighborhood. I grew up there. I ended up meeting y'all around there. But man, I couldn't have my kids there. I saw myself, I cannot raise my daughter where when I could walk up to, which was a half mile up to what used to be Kroger's, to the store, I could do that at 10 years old. There was no way in the world I was going to have my kids do that. And so it was those reasons that I moved out. And I would say what made it different than with my parents, even though I'm the one with the white girl, I was taking my Blackness with me and with my family. They were going to know the struggle. Whereas I always feel that I look at our parents' generation, they wanted us to forget the struggle. They did not want to, I guess, maybe traumatize us from the things that they had experienced from the South. They may, and I think the exception is your family, Kurt, which is why I wanted you here. I think for the average Black family, they didn't want to talk about maybe some of the things that they've seen, maybe some of the people they've seen get lynched, etc. So when they were able to move up north, they forgot about that and didn't put it into us. I wanted to make sure, I want my kids to know the stuff that I experienced in that neighborhood, and then when I started traveling across the country that I experienced, and I want them to even know it today, even though it's still more at a theory level, because we live in, our neighborhood right now is probably, I'm going to guess, maybe about 60% white, and then I might put us, maybe if I had to divide the rest, maybe about 20, probably Black and Latinx are close to running neck and neck, with even, we'd have to put in a Native population there too, because I have 2 reservations that aren't far from here. In fact, they kind of run our community. So a lot more diverse, because I'm not in Phoenix proper. I think Phoenix proper, the Black population may be, if I remember reading correctly, about 8%. And T-Real, I was trying to look up for Florida. like we did one time when I looked up population and demographics. It's amazing because for Florida comes up white alone 77%,
77.
Black or African American alone is 16.9,
Yeah.
Native 0.5, Asian alone 3%, but then we get fuzzy because Hispanic or Latino 26.4%, but then white alone, not Hispanic or Latino. But then how is that different from white alone above? But okay.
Making it clear.
White alone, not Hispanic and Latino, 53%. And this is just an estimate off of 2019. So I'm sure they are really waiting to see what 2020 is going to come in. And I think this is why, you know, we get the white narrative that they're going to soon be a minority population. If those who are truly categorized white alone without Hispanic and Latino is at 53%, 3 more percent, no, you're no longer the majority. So let's begin to close.